Hey everyone, Mark the Movie Man here, and you'll never know who you find down in the spoiler room. And tonight I've got a special guest here that we're going to talk about a new film of his, as well as some indie filmmaking in general. I have Henrique Couto. Did I get
That's
it right?
right. You got it,
Hey,
my man.
all right. Director of a new film coming out, Amityville No Escape. He's made many a film. Let's welcome to the spoiler room, Henrique. How are you doing tonight, Henrique?
I'm doing phenomenally. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to sit with us a little bit and talk about your film, Amityville No Escape. Now, when I saw that this was going to happen, I contacted you. I'm like, oh, I'm curious now because Amityville seems to be on the upswing again as far as in the horror community goes. So, what made you decide to want to do an Amityville story?
Well, I've been obviously a film fan for a long time. I mean, that's the only way you can end up a filmmaker,
Mhm.
is to absolutely love movies because you have to have it in your blood or else you'd be smarter and go on to real estate or something. But I love movies. And one thing I discovered maybe 5 years, 6 years ago was that there was a really expansive franchise of Amityville movies. Most people, are only really familiar with the first three.
Mhm.
They're familiar with the Amityville Horror, the Possession, and the one in 3D. But then there's, the fourth one is a TV movie about a lamp, haunted lamp, the evil escapes.
Mhm.
Some of them are silly, some of them are fun. And actually, one thing that's really important about the original Amityville franchise, is that, in my opinion, it really picks up toward the end. There are 8 original ones. And I think that part 6 is my favorite. It's Amityville 1992. It's About Time, directed by Tony Randell, who did Hellraiser Part 2. Um, it's a really cool flick, and the final one is Amityville Dollhouse. So one time after watching these, as the years go by, I sat with a friend and watched all 8 original Amityville movies in one sitting.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot. That's a long, long commitment, my friend.
That is.
And but it was fun. I like to do marathons and stuff like that. I like the idea of making movies an endurance test. I don't know. Maybe it's because then I don't feel like such a loser. I'm gonna sit for 19 hours. But so after watching those and stuff, it just kind of got into my blood. And I've actually, like, I have a collection of original Amityville one sheets. Like, I have Amityville 1992, Amityville Dollhouse, Amityville Curse, just original posters. So about a year and a half ago, maybe a little bit more, I became aware of the fact that, and this is the big secret, that you can't copyright or trademark the word Amityville, because Amityville is a real place, and it's on a map.
Right.
And because the Amityville horror, it's based on a book, and then the book is supposedly based on a true story, you can't really copyright a true story either, because it's a matter of public record. Now, I couldn't go and make a movie about the Lutzes.
Right.
That is they have publishing rights. That is their story. But the murders at the DeFeo house, the idea of a haunting in the house, that's fair game. So, as a filmmaker, and as a filmmaker who Amityville No Escape was my 13th feature film, and I just started this weekend shooting my 16th feature film. But as a filmmaker who makes films for a living, you need every advantage you can get. So,
Mhm.
one big advantage is putting Amityville in your title, because it's been marketed for 30 years. People know Amityville is hauntings. So, I made a film. We actually shot it under the title The Fear Tapes, but called Amityville No Escape. And that was in order to increase marketability and also allow us to have some spooky ghost fun. And even in your published review, I appreciated you mentioning that your expectations were kind of iffy, because there are quite a few of these Amityville-ish movies out there. And I mean, I'm not unaware of it. I walk the shelves of Family Video, and I see everything that comes out. I rent a ton of it. I'm always very curious, what's out there, what other people are making, things like that, what's getting released, what's getting on shelves, what's getting on Netflix. So on top of that, being a filmmaker for a living, you have to be very conscious of the business end, and not just from a marketing standpoint, but also from a cost perspective, time and money. And Amityville No Escape was the second found footage movie I've made, the first one being a movie called Alone in the Ghost House, which I was very shocked how happy I was with it. We pulled it together. We spent very little money, very little time. And, after 2 months in post, I was sitting watching Alone in the Ghost House with my crew and just saying, like, how is this so good? We didn't have to work nearly as diligently. I mean, and it's because, when you're shooting a narrative feature, there's a lot more lighting, a lot more setups, multiple angles, as opposed to filming a found footage movie. It damn near feels like a play. It's just because you actually act it out, and then the camera catches what it catches. No, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, you can see by doing that, you can see why the big studios latched onto that genre ever since the Blair Witch Project, because they're like, holy crap, we can make a cheap film and get it out there. We have the marketing machine behind it, and just, make a profit, because horror fans will flock to the theaters to just about any film that gets wide release. So it's interesting to hear you say that about how the found footage film, but you found it fairly easy to shoot, though?
Relatively. I mean, every movie is a little bit of a war, every movie is trying. But it was overall a good experience. And, I say this, lovingly, because I really do love movies, but like one of the reasons I made Alone in the Ghost House was dead serious. My car died. And I literally was like, I have to make another movie and get it into a release schedule and get it out into the world to make money, because I have a new expense coming. I have to buy a car.
Sure.
And I mean, it's silly because it kind of pulls the romance back, but at the same time, I mean, that's a blessing. The motivation made me make a whole other movie. So that was kind of like I stashed away that movie for a rainy day in a way. I made that film so that I could keep the lights on, so that we could keep, churning out movies. So it's funny. It's just the nature of it. So
right.
When I started working on Amityville No Escape, that was the other thing about these found footage movies, is you want to make sure that they have a high marketability. So the Amityville angle was perfect. It just fit perfectly. So we pulled it together. I brought on screenwriter Ira Gansler, who's based out of Kentucky. I'm based out of Ohio. And we pulled together an outline, and we went out and we shot the thing. And I couldn't have told you how happy I ended up being. I couldn't have told you how surprised I was, how happy I was with Amityville, although it was a bit more of a journey than Alone in the Ghost House. One of the big complaints I had with Alone in the Ghost House, because I didn't want them to be similar at all.
Sure.
I wanted them to be extremely different from each other. But one of the big things is the only thing that was missing from Ghost House was there was no like outside in the woods. It was all a house. So that's why we had the whole element of like they're camping in the woods and talking about fear and facing, scary things, was because I felt like that was the only trope of found footage that works really well that I didn't get to touch on. I love the nighttime woods, the Blair Witch Project elements, that kind of thing. I meant to make one side note when you mentioned Hollywood's love of found footage movies. They're not smart enough to really truly cash in on them, though. They're like, oh my God, we did so well with this found footage movie. Let's spend $5 million on the next one. Anyway, I mean, Blumhouse is the only one who they will go and make a dirt cheap found footage movie. And that's why even the worst Paranormal Activity movie pretty much works, in my opinion. But anyway, so we made Amityville No Escape, and I do think it's my scariest movie, although I'm shooting a movie right now called The Haunting Inside, and I'm trying really hard to top it. I don't know if I will be able to, but boy, we did a shot last night that gave everyone in the crew chills, and we're just standing there watching it. Like it wasn't even through the camera. So I'm hopeful, but it's always good to try and top yourself if you can.
And I will say there are some very creepy hair stand on end moments in Amityville No Escape, which again was a pleasant surprise when you go into a film or a found footage film. You're like, okay, you kind of know what to expect, but you did a number of things in this film which I thought were a great approach. One of them was the minimize of jump scares. Now I know they're effective, but what's your feeling on jump scares? I kind of prefer the longer or the corner out of your eye type of scare, which you have plenty of in No Escape. How do you feel about jump scares, though, on the whole?
Well, the problem with jump scares is inherent, and that is that you can become numb to them.
Hmm.
So they're great, but if you pack a movie with jump scares, unless you can increase the intensity every single time, eventually your audience is going to get numb to it. It's just going to be what they're used to looking at. It's the same with like blood and guts. If you have a disemboweling in your movie and it's shocking, it makes everybody gag. If you do one every single scene, then people are going to go right back to eating their popcorn in no time. You know, it's just the way the human mind works, and that's one big element of directing is you have to have a good concept of perspective, of your own perspective, of the people looking on's perspective. It really pays to be vain. Really, I mean, if you worry about the way people see you and what you do, then you
Hmm.
can definitely think a lot about how's this going to look on camera. What are people going to think about this if they're coming from this cold? So I knew I wanted some jump scares,
Hmm.
but I didn't pack it with them. I also can't overstate that I'm very obsessive about making the found footage element make sense and making it somewhat reasonable. And that's the other thing. So when you're making a found footage movie, like the camera can't capture everything perfectly. There have to be a lot of things that are almost completely missed out on. Like there's a very bloody payoff in Amityville No Escape that you really only see out of the corner of the camera for a second when they're getting away from it.
Hmm.
Because when we were on set, we shot the first take and we like got like kind of a close up, and then I stopped and I was like, these kids are not gonna film this gruesome scene. They're gonna see it and they're gonna realize it's time to leave, and they're gonna turn around and they're gonna get the hell out. They're gonna be really uncomfortable. They're gonna be disgusted. They're gonna be scared. Their first thought's not gonna be, well, we better document this for the police. They're not. They're just
No.
not. Especially in the context. So with the jump scares though, I had one ace in the sleeve, which is there was a big problem with Amityville No Escape when I first shot it.
Hmm.
We filmed it, I believe it was in September, and it was very cold, and it turned out fine, but there was something missing. And myself and my editor Eric Whiting, we sat down with the first cut of the movie, which was about 71 minutes, which is too short. Uh,
Right.
but on top of being too short, I just wasn't happy with it. Um, and most of my movies, I've been very fortunate. I've been happy with them immediately, and they don't have to linger and post for very long. But with this one, I was like, we gotta make this better. And the original version of the film did not feature the sequences with Julia Gomez.
Okay.
So I sat with Eric and we looked at the movie, and I said, these kids in the B story or A story, however you want to describe it, of the film, they're more likable if we trim it down. Their stuff is scarier if we trim it down. So basically, I said, let's cut their stuff down to about 50 minutes. So we have nothing but the good stuff. No padding, no nothing that I'm not happy with. And I will come up with something to put in the film that will feed the theme, feed the narrative, but be different. Because I've always believed that the best part about making a film is that you have to be creative every second. Not just when you're writing the script. You have to be creative about how to get the money to shoot it. You have to be creative about how to market it. You have to be creative about how to solve problems all the way through. That's all filmmaking is. It's just solving problems. So I sat and it took me about a week, and all of a sudden it just hit me. I was like, you know what this movie needs? It needs more of the house. Because
Hmm.
we shied away from the house because I was really into the Blair Witch kind of ness. So I said, okay, so we got a woman in a house. And I was like, and I started to think, what can we do with that? And I immediately jumped to my mind. I was like, bring Julia Gomez in. Julia is a phenomenal actress. I'd worked with her before that on a Western I did called Calamity Jane's Revenge, which if any of your listeners are interested, it's on Amazon Prime right now. Give it a watch. It's a pretty fun little kind of oddly feminist Western. Very proud of it, but I was so impressed with Julia on that because she came to my office, read for it, and I cast her immediately. So I called Julia and I said, hey, can we get you in this flick? And she'd actually not been able to be in the movie. Originally, she was supposed to play Aaliyah Eckhart's character,
Okay. Hmm.
and but she was not. She was unavailable. So all of a sudden, she was thrilled because she was like, "Seriously, I can actually." Because she wanted to be in a scary movie. She's one of those people that scary movies scare her deeply. So of course, she's obsessed with the idea of being in one. Um, but so she was like, "Oh my god!" So I can be in Amityville No Escape after all. And I was like, "Yes." So we met, and she and I actually just talked about what I was thinking. And then the next day, I spent about I started on about 2 or 3 really agonizing nights writing all of the Julia Gomez scenes, and trying to somewhat painstakingly make them apply to what you saw on the other half of the movie.
Well,
Um,
well, I think it did apply because the kids are doing a shoot and a documentary about fear, and here through her character, we're seeing fear develop
Absolutely.
as she lives in that house. So those are some of my favorite moments actually are with her
Well,
in
and,
this
and
film.
and she got to be, unlike the kids in the other segment where they're together and they're dealing with things together for the most part. She gets to be alone.
Mhm.
She gets to be right up in the camera. As to where their presentation style is very different. So you get Julia, whose character, is in 1997. We shot it on a 1997 era Hitachi 8mm camcorder.
Mhm.
Which is another thing that drives me crazy. I couldn't shoot it and then just grain it. That drives me crazy. I see it right away and go, that's fake. So I was like, no, we're shooting this on 8mm tape, no matter how miserable that will be in post production. And boy, was it miserable in post production. But we could talk about that in a little bit.
Sure.
But so we had this camera. We went to this house location, which is a house we'd used actually in Alone in the Ghost House, and we'd used it in Haunted House on Sorority Row. It's a very creepy house that's quasi abandoned. I mean, it's owned by people, but no one lives there currently. So we started working with her, and Julia and I spent a lot of time just talking about like fear, because that's the theme.
Mhm.
Fear, and expectation. That was the other thing that that was the theme I believe the movie had, was expectation, because there were characters who were worried about impressing their father, because there's a brother and sister who are trying to do well in school. And then there's Julia's character, whose expectation is that she needs to live by herself until her husband gets back from war and be well, even though she's never been alone before. So I kind of played with the elements of fear I have about feeling like I'm not an adult. I think
Mhm.
we all have kind of an imposter syndrome about the fact that, wait, I don't have my stuff together like everybody else does. Everybody else knows exactly how to be an adult, but I clearly do not. And in reality, I think we're all kind of struggling with that. We're all kind of like, wait, there's no handbook, there's no
Mhm.
instructions. We're just making this up as we go. Okay, whatever. So I played with that a lot because I was trying to figure out what would keep Julia's character in the house. And I decided the only way we could keep her in the house was to make her not trust her own senses, her own fear. So I that's when I came up with the idea of her really believing that it's not that the house is haunted, it's that she doesn't want to be there,
Mhm.
and that she needs to learn to grow up and suck it up.
Yeah, you get that feeling from her, and what I liked how it progressed. She she did a really good job, I thought. You really get that feeling from her that she is very reluctant, but she's really trying to convince herself I can do this, you know.
Absolutely.
But you could tell behind her eyes, it was a great performance because you could tell behind her eyes she really didn't believe what she was saying.
Yeah, she was trying to fake it till she makes it. And you could see that behind her eyes even at only 480i.
Yeah.
At only standard definition, you could see it. I mean, that's a testament to Julia. She's an
Mhm.
incredibly talented actress. And it was really like it was just so obvious to me. I was like, if I make her that character, I know that she'll translate to the audience.
Mhm.
Being so upfront and up close and personal. And also she has an extensive theater background, so her experience with monologues was extremely proficient.
Mhm.
So it was just it was a win-win-win. And we had a lot of fun with it. We shot all of Julia's parts in one day, one
Wow.
Sunday. And it was the beginning of spring of the following year after we shot the other parts. And We had one, I had this big soft light that made the camera look a little bit better. You know, it threw a
Mhm.
little bit of extra light, but otherwise, you know, we shot it pretty much just straight up. What you see is what you get. And in between scenes, Julia and I would just sit there and she'd tell me what her idea was, and I'd tell her what my idea was, and we would just go back and forth until we really liked what she was about to do. I mean, we had an outline, we had
Mhm.
what each scene was. And we also had a lot of fun with improvisation. I mean, there were little improvs like she goes outside the house to show the camera these flowers. That was because when she arrived at the location, she flipped her, you know, her head because she was like, "Oh my God, these purple flowers!" And she kept talking and talking and talking. And then when she was doing her monologue, she just mentioned those purple flowers, and I was like, "Let's go outside and see the purple flowers then. Why
Sure.
not?" You know. Another great improv was I think you referenced it in your review. No spoilers needed, but the scene with the dress.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That that scene. Tell me what you thought of it. I want to hear your side of it.
I what I was wondering where it was going. It was great because it gave a nice little remembrance of people kind of, forgot along the way or didn't quite think that maybe this was like an Amityville. She puts on that dress and it's like, okay, that feels like, we're getting really into some Amityville history here without directly referencing it, just the way she wore the dress and how that scene progressed gradually and subtly. The subtlety in that scene is what caught me with that because of the way she does that monologue. I think is very effective because you don't exactly realize just at first what's happening, and then you realize what's happening, and you're like, "Oh crap!" and that's the feeling I got with this, like, "Oh no, what's going to happen to her now?"
Yeah, and well, and it's really unsettling. And the funniest part is that was not planned. That wasn't even in the outline.
Mhm.
We shot it on Sunday, so on Saturday I was out um garage sailing. You know, I was driving around my neighborhood because there are garage sales. I love garage sales. And that dress was just on a rack. It was like $3. And I looked at that dress. I was with my girlfriend, and I looked at that dress, and I turned to her and I said, and I was just like, what if Julia Gomez puts this dress on and becomes infused with a spirit?
Mhm.
And literally she was like, oh my God. And I was like, and I like couldn't get my wallet fast enough to like buy that. So when I got to the location, I told Julia about it. She's like, that's so cool. And I was like, well, when there's a lull in shooting between lunch and dinner or whatever, we'll do it. And we did. And I'm so glad we did. It really worked great. Um, yeah.
It added the character, I think, and it kept the character of the house that is associated with most Amityville films as well. I thought, at least it came across to me, it helped give, remind possibly the viewers who may not be too familiar with Amityville, oh yeah, this is a creepy house she lives in. If you haven't gotten it before, she just put on a random dress from the house and this happens to her, and you're just like, man, she needs to get out of the house.
Yeah, which the house used to be polite enough to tell you to get out, but in my movie, it stopped being nice.
Yeah. Now, you said you've used the house before. The windows, I mean, you've got the idea, especially with the camera that she's shooting on, you get the feeling this was the actual house. How did you find this house
Oh, well,
initially?
actually, that's movie magic.
Hmm.
The windows, the classic half crescent windows were a different house.
Oh, they were. Okay.
Yeah. So what we did was we never showed the house from the front except in that one introduction.
Hmm.
So, and what we did was literally when she flips the camera to point it at the house, there's a cut hidden in that flip.
Okay.
And that's a Dutch colonial house that is not very far from where I live
Hmm.
that we used for the cover box and also for that one shot in the film.
Nice. See, folks, the art of editing, they can make it look like anything. That's what's
I
great
I I just
about
remember
movies.
doing that,
Mhm.
putting that cut in there, and then literally like I watched it and I was like, oh wow, it's done already. That was perfect. All right, done. That was it. Like no tweaking, no moving anything. I was like, oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. The camera spins, and I just left in the sound of her, saying "ta-da" and everything. I just didn't change the sound, but I changed the picture.
Yeah,
Um,
it worked well because you can't tell. So
it's shocking. Like I remember, I remember when I did that and showed somebody just the trailer had, that shot in it. And somebody was just like, oh my, because they were on set. They were like, oh my God. Because they knew that wasn't the house. They were just like,
Right.
whoa. And I had to be like, it was a really tricky shot to get to because the house that we used for those windows was like in a neighborhood. So I had to pan the camera just right so you don't see any of the neighbor houses or anything, because it's supposed to be isolated, at least a
Right.
little bit isolated. So yeah, that was definitely some movie magic. I even impressed myself on that one. I will admit, I was very impressed too.
Well, it's always good to surprise yourself every so often with a project. So,
Yeah.
uh, now the rest of the cast, who I enjoyed as well, this crew, had you worked with many of them before, or did you do some auditioning and such for the roles?
We didn't do any auditions on this one. The only newcomer on this picture was Allison Egan, who
Okay.
played the sister.
Mhm.
Um, Allison and I had worked together in a different capacity. She was in a film called Primordial, directed by my editor and producing partner Eric Whiting. She had a role in that, and I was a producer on the set. So we worked together in that capacity. And after we'd worked on that, she and I got to talking, and she was like, just holler at me sometime. I'd love to come and work with you on one of your movies. So, about, I think it was maybe 6 months later, 7 months after Primordial, I gave her a call. I said, Amityville No Escape. And she was like, huh? And I was like, come to Dayton. Let's do this. So, and then rounding out the cast as well, we had Josh Miller, who has since gone on. He starred in my follow-up film after Amityville called Nothing Good Ever Happens, which is a drama comedy I highly recommend people check out. It's on Amazon Prime. And he's a very extremely talented actor. I think before that we'd worked together on Calamity Jane's Revenge and Making Out, which is my romantic comedy I did just before we did Amityville No Escape. I like to genre jump. It's very fun for me. And then after that we had Joni Durian, who Joni and I have worked together a ton, and actually she's the lead in Haunting Inside, which I'm
Okay.
shooting right now. She's incredibly talented and did a great job. And then we also had Aaliyah Eckhart. And I'm totally forgetting. Well, Aaliyah, before I move on, Aaliyah Eckhart had been in Making Out, and she was actually our makeup artist on Calamity Jane's Revenge, and she actually has a supporting lead in Haunting Inside. But there is one newcomer I almost completely forgot. I mean, he's not entirely a newcomer, but Michael Ralston, who played Simon, the camera guy.
Mhm.
He had been very briefly in Scare Waves, a horror anthology I had done. He played like one step above a featured extra. I mean, because he had a couple lines, and he did a great job in it. And the thing that struck me about him was that he was really excited. He
Mhm.
really wanted to do stuff. He was an extra in Calamity Jane's Revenge, and like anytime I'd put a call out on Facebook and say we need extras, he'd be like, "Man, what time? I'll be there." So if kids, let this be a lesson. If you wanna work on movies, especially independent movies, and you want to make an impression, just be excited and on time. I mean, honestly, because he was excited and on time more than once. So finally, I was like, I should just offer him a real role. Because if he's going to show up as excited and on time as he does to be an extra, then dude's going to be, very valuable.
Yeah, the on time part seems to be very important for I found with a number of other indie filmmakers as well. They always talk about, yeah, be on time, because it seems to be a bit of a challenge to get everyone on time occasionally. So
Oh,
yeah.
I can tell you wholeheartedly, there have been actors that I've worked with who have been extremely talented, had an extremely great look, and they were habitually late, and I never worked with them again.
Mhm.
It's not worth the stress. I mean, when
Right.
you're in indie on my level, you're the producer and the director. You literally have to make sure lunch is on time, and that you're on schedule, and that you get a good performance, and that it's going to cut together. You have to do all of it. And the less you have to worry about somebody showing up at friggin' 9 a.m. on a Saturday. I don't even do early calls. I
Sure.
don't. I like Haunting Inside. We started at 10 a.m. Like, I don't do early calls unless it's absolutely necessary. I'm a cool guy. I don't make people show up 2.5 hours before start. I'm a guy who's like, if we're doing a movie and the first shot is at 10 a.m., I say, well, if you're going to be in costume and you're doing your own makeup, then you show up at 9:30 or 9:40, and I won't even sweat it. So in a way, it's like I'm like the cool teacher, like I'm the cool guy. So when you don't do your homework or you show up late when I'm the one who's not making you get up early anyway, it
Mhm.
hurts my feelings. It makes me go, maybe I shouldn't be so cool. Sorry, that was a tirade I didn't mean to go
No.
on, but it's true. Like, and
Mhm.
and as a filmmaker for hire, doing like director photography work and things like that, I've learned that showing up on time and sober and having a good attitude can really get you a ton of clients for life, man. I
Mhm.
mean, so that's a big thing, but it also I did also think Michael had a really likable quality. I mean, clearly
Mhm.
because I wanted him to show up
Yeah.
to shoot. So, and when I emailed him and said, like, how would you feel about doing this? He was pumped. And he was so intense about it too. Like when he showed up, he was like, okay, show me how to use this camera. I want to make sure it looks like I know what I'm doing. And I was like, all right, man, here's the camera. This is the button that records. This is the button that zooms. We're done.
Yeah, he really seemed to be in his role, in the role, into the role. Definitely a very exciting character. You is it tough when you write characters not to fall into too many tropes? Because I thought there was a good separation, and we didn't have your just standard. Because especially with found footage films, there's a couple of tropes that you usually run into, which is one, you kind of get those characters like that's the rude guy, that's the the quiet one. And in this one you wrote you wrote these characters, they didn't feel quite cliche as they normally do. And was that a kind of a challenge of what you're trying to go for? Maybe not, because I know you don't have a whole lot of time to do character development, but you also, I think, want to do fresher characters, correct?
Sure. Well, one of the keys was to cast, to write to your cast. To
Mm,
have, for the most part, I had an idea of who was going to play everybody, so I really went toward their type. Tried to
sure.
make it them because they're not going to be quite so tropeful. But I also believe wholeheartedly that you should only do the best tropes. If
Yeah.
there's a good trope, if there's a trope you really dig, do it because the fact is life is cliche.
Sure.
Life is tropes. That's just the life. What was I heard a comedian once said, like, life is hack. Like there's a reason comedians joke about their wives and joke about their in-laws. Life is exactly that. So
Mhm.
I'm never too fearful of tropes. But and there were a few like really strange turns I took with the characters
Mhm.
that I was worried people wouldn't understand, but at the same time I was like, to hell with it, man. It's a movie. I'm going to make this movie. So and that is one thing some people have told me, have suggested that being as prolific as I am, making 2, 3, maybe 4 features in a year, that you stop caring about the movies. They're like, aren't you afraid you're gonna stop caring about the movies? And I'm like, yes and no, because to be honest, I take way more risks knowing that, like, what if somebody doesn't get this? Screw them. I'm making another movie in 3 months. Like, like if they don't like the way this guy is in this movie, they'll like it way more in the next one. Like,
Mhm.
you get a chance to take more risks because it's not like this one movie is going to be your one baby and 4 years later you're going to make another one.
Sure.
So like one of the big risks I took was I made Josh Miller's character extremely strange
Mhm.
in certain ways. I had this opinion of his character that he was obsessive about power, but only in very specific, very undertoned ways.
Sure.
Which is why there's that sequence. There are sequences where he and his girlfriend are being extremely sexual and they don't care who sees.
Yep.
To me, that was playing on the fact that he really doesn't care. Like he wants you to be uncomfortable. Like, oh God, they're like really going at it right there. And he'd be like, what? Are you going to tell me to stop? No, you're not going to tell me to stop. He knows that they're not
Mhm.
going to tell him to stop. I don't know if it played perfectly like that, but that was my thought process. I was like, what if he just does not care
He
because he knows that no one can stop him?
excuse me.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, he came off as the alpha character, definitely like wanting to be the alpha male constantly.
Yeah. And the only person who laughs at him is his sister.
Mhm.
His sister, who obviously, of course she would, because she's known him since he was in diapers. She could just laugh at it and be like, I'm not threatened by you at all, dude. You're, like we were wearing diapers together.
Mhm.
Like, you're not a tough guy. Um, And that's actually, I mean, even though I will own wholeheartedly that it helps the movie's marketability to have topless nudity as it
Mhm.
did, I mean, I would never deny that nudity helps sell a movie. There
Skin
are
to win.
well, yeah, I mean, there have been times that I've put nudity in a movie strictly for story reasons, and there have been
Mhm.
times that I've put nudity in movies for a marketing reason and then found a story reason to fit it. I mean, I would hate me if I didn't be able to admit that. You know, I would hate if I was somebody else. See, it's all perspective, director perspective, how other people see it. But that was one of the reasons I had. There's a scene, you know, where
Mhm.
they're in the pool and he's like making out with his girlfriend and literally like taking her top off, and he doesn't care. And somebody makes a joke about his sister who gets in the pool taking her top off, and she's like, "I don't give a crap. I'll take it off. I don't care." Like, she just does not care. She's like, "What? You think you're funny? Here, boom,
Mhm.
done." Like, I thought that was an interesting element of her personality, and actually, truth be told, very much like Allison Egan in some ways. I mean, I don't know her incredibly well, but no, but I mean,
Mhm.
she is tough without being a jerk.
Right.
Like, you challenge Allison and she will stare you down and be right. And I like that about her very much. So and that fed into it as well. So but I did take some chances with that, and there were some subplots that we ended up removing,
Mhm.
some inner character things. The Simon character was actually very in love with the Allison's character, but we kind
Mhm.
of ended up kind of losing a lot of that when we pared down the movie, but I think it helped the movie overall. It's just when you're making a found footage movie, the most important thing really is perspective. Like, why would this be filmed?
Mhm.
Why would this be captured? And one of the most important elements of a found footage movie, in my opinion, almost as important as the entire movie that precedes it, is the ending. Because with a found footage movie, you've already set up an expectation that something happens that makes this footage be found.
Mhm.
So I honestly believe that like 50% of your found footage movie is what happens in the movie, and then 50% is the ending, is exactly how it ends, how the camera shuts off or falls on the ground and runs out of battery, or whatever it's going to be. That has to matter because that tells you a humongous amount of the story.
Yeah, it is a lot of setup with found footage. I found after watching many of them over the years, that payoff. I just watched one recently that involved alien abduction, and most of it was shot kind of like a documentary style.
Hmm.
And then the last, like the secret lost tape of the footage that was missing is watched, and then you get to see what actually happened to these missing teens. And it was called Phoenix Forgotten. It just
Okay.
came out. It was a wide release film, but it didn't really get any popular, any PR or anything. It just showed up in the movie theater. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll go see it, and I actually enjoyed it. But I noticed that now with that kind of setup, that found footage is all the setup, and especially with Amityville No Escape, you do have that payoff, and what I liked about that too with that payoff is, again, it still left not everything explained, because a lot of films, I think, feel like they need to hold your hand, like you said, with an excuse of why are they filming all the time? Well, here they're shooting a documentary on film, so it makes sense. Oh, sorry. So you don't have that person going, shoot it, shoot everything, keep it running.
Yeah. Well, and one of the big elements you have to always be thinking about like what would they do? Like when we did Alone in the Ghost House, one of the big reasons that everything gets filmed the way it does is it was a TV crew making a sizzle reel for a reality show. So that's something that, I mean, I worked in television for years, and you do film everything. And
Sure.
anytime there's anything interesting to point the camera at, you point it because you shoot now and figure it out later. So you know, that's a good play on it as well. So but and I also want to say that when I was writing those Julia Gomez scenes and I came up with the big twist that's at the end of Amityville,
Mhm.
which I am so proud. That's the other thing, is like when I do a found footage movie, you will never ever ever guess how it ends. I no, because I won't make it unless I come up with an ending that you really really won't guess. Because full disclosure, in November of last year, I shot a found footage movie, which I have not announced or released yet.
Oh, okay.
The news will be dropping maybe in a month, maybe sooner. It just depends. It's still in post. It's totally different from Amityville, totally different from Alone in the Ghost House. Presentation styles totally different. But the ending, like, you'll never guess it. Like, I'll tell you now so that you can try to guess when you watch it. You'll never guess how it ends. You never will, because much like the ending of Amityville, when I came up with it, I screamed. It was like midnight. I screamed, and I immediately called one of my good friends and just told them the ending, and they screamed, and I was like, we got it. And I mean, I think I guess it would have been September of last year, like right before we made this found footage movie. I was driving my car, I was driving out to New Jersey, 9-hour drive, and or I was driving home, 9 hours. And like all of a sudden I just came up with the ending, and I just started like punching the steering wheel and going, yes, 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 yes. And immediately called one of my writer buddies and said, like, we've got to make a found footage movie that ends like this.
That's awesome. So yeah, we'll look forward to the news of that one. Definitely with that. So you said you're working on a film now. You've always got, sounds like you've always got projects going with this. Anything that you want to mention that you've got coming up that people should look for? You already, you mentioned, I think, a little bit of what you shot in, what you're shooting over this weekend. Can you give us a little more information about that film?
Absolutely. It's a feature horror film called Haunting Inside. I'm very excited about it because actually, I mean, it was very influenced by Amityville No Escape, because when I premiered it, I had so many people run up to me and tell me, like, that was your scariest movie, you know, and I'd look at them and be like, wow, they've seen all of them. So they know. So I was like, okay, I want to go pedal to the metal with atmosphere, because I a lot of my movies have been all about being kind of thrill rides. The horror films have been more about like boom, 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 you know, thing happen, things happen. So I was like, what if we made this creepy story in a house? So it's about a girl who is autistic and agoraphobic. She's about 27, 28 years old. And she lives with her brother, who's her caretaker. And because of her mind working a little differently than other people, if she gets really bored, she can get kind of violent. You know, she can lash out. She has episodes. And one of the ways that she stays calm is she plays board games, but she plays them by herself. She'll play a board game and play all the parts herself. She'll play like 6 people playing the game of life all at once, because she's got that mind. She can do that. And so her brother will literally buy her just stacks at like rummage sales, stacks of board games. And of course, one of them is a very odd Ouija board.
Ah, of course.
So she plays, and kids, you better know this. She plays the Ouija board alone, which you are absolutely not supposed to do. And, but the cool thing about this movie, and I don't think it gives away too much, is that the ghosts that come to her look completely normal, and they're shot in like it's daytime in the house.
Sure.
And they're her friends. And because of her lack of understanding of kind of normal, like societal norms and social norms,
right?
Because she doesn't, it's all good. Because of her lack of understanding of like social norms, when the ghosts are really friggin' weird and scary, doesn't even faze her. She doesn't understand. She just knows like, oh, these are my friends. So the ghosts slowly start to make her do things that make it appear to her brother that she is getting worse and that she's becoming less manageable. So the movie's horror is her kind of hopefully figuring out that these ghosts are not her friends, and her brother, who never sees the ghosts, who is being plagued by these nightmares that he's going to have to commit his sister and he'll never see her again because she's so unmanageable. So it's kind of like, in a way, kind of similar like the Babadook, how it's like, maybe there's a ghost, or maybe your child is just impossible. And the mother is just, you know, tormented by the idea that her son is just impossible.
Sure. Oh, that sounds really interesting. So we'll look forward to seeing that in the near future. Hopefully, are you planning this year possibly, or?
Oh, well, it's going to be complete this year. We'll be wrapping up shooting before the end of May.
Okay.
It's May 1st right now as we're recording this, so very soon. We're going to get that cut together, and we'll premiere it out in Ohio where I am. And then we're going to find it a distributor that will treat it real nice and pretty. And speaking of which, I do want to mention Amityville No Escape comes out nationally June 13th. Tuesday, June 13th. You can buy it on DVD, and you can rent it on video on demand on Amazon and other platforms. But also, I actually just found this out like right before we went on the air, so I don't even have the specifics, unfortunately. But around the release date of June 13th, it will be available to rent on many of the national cable outlets. Like,
Nice.
I don't have the exact list, but I'm sure it'll be on like Comcast and Spectrum and probably 3 or 4 others. And that'll be my first film to be on cable video on demand, which I'm very excited about. And I hope it'll open up the floodgates to allow a wider audience to get the creepies. You know, I want to give people the creepies.
Well, congratulations on that. That sounds awesome.
Thank you.
Hope it does do well in there. I do have a couple questions from a certain Thomas Berdinsky, Sasquatch.
I love Tom.
He sent me a couple questions because I let him know that I was going to talk to you, and so he just wanted to know if you've experienced any of the Amityville curse, because he thought you might have at Cinema Wasteland.
You know what? Maybe we did. At Cinema Wasteland in Cleveland, Ohio, it was the first time Amityville No Escape had ever been available to the public on DVD. We had advanced copies, and there had been a freak snow that weekend, and the roof was leaking into the ceiling right above our table. That was literally where so we didn't get wet, thank goodness. It was myself and Aaliyah Eckhart were there signing them. But the ceiling started to bow in like the tile, the tile started to bow, and so the hotel had to come out and move our table, cover our movies with a cloth to protect it, and burst the ceiling tile and take it down. And then I had to sell the movie all day Saturday with a bucket, just water dripping into it. So unfortunately, I don't know if I can consider it the Amityville curse. I was hoping that it would be blood,
Sure.
bleed coming through the ceiling tile. But unfortunately, it was just plain old Cleveland water, which is close to blood. I mean, it tastes similar, but otherwise it's...
I was going to say it might be a similar color, right?
And luckily, I mean, I haven't had any people saying "get out" at a convention in a long time, so I'm very lucky for that. So, but I'm still open for any Amityville curse that will have me. So, it's still early. The release date is coming, so we'll see. I'm hoping there aren't a ton of flies, although my girlfriend is an entomology major and she studies flies, so she's praying that we get overrun with flies.
Well, hopefully not too many so you can take care of them, but enough to film it, because that'd be a great extra, right?
Well, and that's a complete, I just want to mention that as a side note, that was another great coincidence about that location we shot at. All those dead flies were just there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I was wondering about that because you're in the house, and I'm like, I was just kept thinking, I hope everyone had their tetanus shot.
Luckily the house isn't that bad. It's probably like, truth be told, because I've spent a lot of time there, I bet if you put like $2,000 into it, it would be totally good to live in. But it is a little rough around the edges. And one time when we were filming there, we came in, we shot the half of Haunted House and Sorority Row in the end of September and half at the beginning of November, because October is like a dead zone for me. I can't do much. I was booked for appearances and travel. So we show up and we're like disturbed by the fact that the ceilings are just covered with ladybugs. We're just like, man, there are just so many ladybugs, because it was unseasonably warm. So we're like, man, there are just so many ladybugs, but they didn't get in the way or anything. They were all on the ceiling and the walls. So we were like, well, we'll leave it be. They're just ladybugs. So we come back in November and it's frozen. So there are just dead ladybugs all over the carpet. So many so that I was like, we cannot film here until we sweep. Because these girls are walking around in slippers or bare feet. Like, we cannot have them crunching around on these. So Eric Whiting, my good friend, editor, production partner, who I adore him, and he's a bit funny.
Mm-hmm.
I tell Eric, I'm like, Eric, you got to sweep this while we're prepping the camera. Like, you got to sweep all this up. He's like, all right. So I'm in the other room. I come back in and I look at him sweeping, and he's sweeping them into the corner. And I'm like, Eric, what are you doing? He's like, I'm getting them out of the way. I'm like, Eric, sweep them out the door. So that's one of my favorite stories about haunted house on Sorority Row. So, but yeah, needless to say, that house has a little Amityville curse of its own every now and then. So hopefully, you know, no Amityville curse, further curse will come upon me, especially not any curse that involves a haunted lamp, because that's just awkward.
Yeah. That is. Well, I think we will wrap it up tonight, Henrik. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us about this film. You heard it, folks. That was June 16th, did you say, or 13th?
13th. Lucky 13th.
Lucky 13, June 13. Look for Amityville No Escape. I think it's worth a watch. I appreciate you taking this time. And where can they find your other stuff at? Why don't you go ahead and plug where they can find your stuff at and where they can possibly buy it as well?
Absolutely. Well, the best place to go is definitely Amazon.com. I mean, it's the biggest marketplace in the world. My name is hard to spell, but if you look at the show notes for this episode, copy and paste that into Amazon, you'll basically only find films I've worked on, that I've directed, produced, etc. But you can also go to incrediblyhandsome.com. I own that web address, incrediblyhandsome.com, and that's my personal web store. Any movies you buy on incrediblyhandsome.com come signed and directly from me. So, and you can also find me on any social media, especially Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Feel free to add me and shoot me a message if you watch one of my pieces and tell me what you think. I'd really love to hear from you.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for joining us in the spoiler room. And until next time, we'll say goodnight, folks.